Hey neighbor,
What?
could you throw the ball back?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. Oh, and be careful. The mosquitoes are coming back, don't you know?
Wait, the what? Ah! Let's talk about neighbors.
Hello Neighbor is a stealth horror game where you try to sneak into your creepy neighbor's basement. At least that's what the developers keep trying to tell me. The original game released back in December of 2017, although only on Windows and Xbox, coming to the other platforms a year later, and was met with...
I actively despise this game. This game is bad.
Was one of the most miserable, mind-numbing, and confusing experiences I have ever had.
But where did it go wrong? How did it go from an incredible concept to a horrible game and somehow spin an entire franchise out of it? How did its spin-offs and sequels improve or fall short on the potential of said concept?
Well, today I'm here to answer all of that, along with why there's a new computer here. That's because this video canonically takes place after Mario Party 9, but for certain reasons, that one can't be finished yet.
The information on Hello Neighbor's development and early builds is surprisingly extensive, with about a dozen different trailers, alphas, and betas. Watching this game be made was very interesting. I can see why the first game had so much hype surrounding it. The earliest proof of concept footage I could find was a concept animation that showcased what made this idea so incredible. The player uses some clever distractions by setting up a lawnmower to hit a car and using the remote to turn on the TV to get the neighbor downstairs. However, upon going up the stairs, the player has to shove some furniture to keep the neighbor out of the room the player was trying to look through. And it was at this moment that everyone who has ever seen this got instantly hooked on the game, because the neighbor moves a ladder and breaks through the window, on the second floor mind you, to get to the player, showcasing how smart the AI is. He throws a massive box to keep the player from leaving through the front door, and finally catches the player by closing the garage door and preventing their escape. You're pretty smart, but this is his house, and he will always be able to get to you no matter where you are in it. This concept is somewhat reinforced with the announcement trailer, which showed off some pretty close to finished gameplay, with the player trying to distract the neighbor and sneak around, snatching the key and the hammer as stealthily as possible. When the neighbor notices him though, the chase begins and the neighbor cuts off his escape route twice, leading to a sudden end with the player in front of an important looking door. The neighbor catches them from behind and buries them alive. This looked like a genuinely good game and that it would be an incredibly cool experience, and in only 1 month's time, we would get to play it ourselves.
The pre-alpha was the first publicly available version of Hello Neighbor, and the devs had a very interesting strategy to promote it. Around late 2016, when the era of Let's Play YouTube was at its peak, the developers contacted the biggest names in gaming and asked them to play their game and tell them what they thought. This strategy would persist even to the final release of the game, and it clearly worked because the game was a massive financial success. Unlike me.
The pre-alpha starts out with the player facing their neighbor's house at night. A brightly glowing basement door stands right within view. Out of curiosity, the player will of course go into the house, but nobody seems to be home. Upon walking up to the basement door, however, the neighbor catches the player and the goal becomes obvious. Avoid the neighbor and make it into that basement. The door is now boarded up and requires a key, a crowbar, and a lock code, forcing the player to explore the house, with a catch. Every time you get caught, the neighbor will start to catch on to your tricks and make your life a little harder. Bear traps, cameras, heck, even straight up boarding up windows and blocking doors you like using. The neighbor is a threat because of how bad it is to get caught and how well he knows his house. Every single failure makes the next attempt even harder, with the goal ever so tantalizingly close. It's always right within view every time you spawn. The lock code, I can't even remember the intended way to find, but the crowbar and key are simple enough. The neighbor must be distracted somehow because he will sit himself right in front of the door you need to open and watch TV like an average middle-aged man. Upon opening the door, there's nothing, but that's only because this is an early alpha. The gameplay was pretty good, and the neighbor actually felt like a threat because of how claustrophobic his house was and how much better at navigating it he was. The only way to end a chase was to sleep in your home, and if you got caught or slept a total of 5 times, the neighbor would start patrolling his house because he knows something is up.
Heck, I'd start patrolling if I found the same person snooping twice. If they aren't going to learn from being politely asked to leave, maybe they'll learn from a shotgun blast to the face.
The pre-alpha was a great, albeit small, proof of concept that demonstrates some of the best parts of the Hello Neighbor idea, namely a claustrophobic house and smart AI with actual penalties for getting caught. Sure, it was pretty buggy and clearly not finished, but it was only an alpha build, so it wasn't expected to be a finished and fully polished game. Still, the art style and overall quality of the house is really good, and this would persist into the next public build of the game, Alpha 1. This build is essentially a bigger and improved version of the pre-alpha, using a similar but expanded house layout with 2 floors and quite a few more puzzles to solve. The opening actually teaches you how to play the game this time, although it doesn't give as compelling of a reason to go snooping in the neighbor's house. The key to the door no longer sits conveniently right next to it, but instead lies behind a series of logic-based item puzzles strewn around the map. This burial room shows that to get the shovel, you will need a bell, and one can be seen on an isolated dresser in the middle of a second-story pool.
Because everybody's got one of those.
A shark of some kind patrols the water and keeps you from crossing the pool. However, you can use this boiler that is conveniently located next to one of the only entrances to the house to freeze over the water and get across. Once you use the bell on the grave, you get the shovel and dig out the mannequin of a teacher. With nowhere else really to go, you head back upstairs and enter a strange schoolroom with several math questions on the board and some numbers spread around the room. You can put these numbers on the answer blanks, but something keeps knocking them down with paper airplanes. If you have the teacher mannequin, they stop throwing the airplanes and you can do math in peace. Well, as much peace as the neighbor will give you, as he is no joke in this build and can get to you no matter where you are in the house. Even if you block doors with chairs, it will only slow him down as he can kick the door down or go around to one of the other entrances to each room. Even if you somehow manage to get to the second floor without freezing the pool, you still aren't safe, because he has a personal elevator that allows him to get to the second floor extremely quickly. Anyway, as a reward for answering the math questions, you get a toy gun which goes into the room right next to the school, which clearly shows that the toy gun is needed. Fiddling around and eventually pressing the right key attaches the toy gun and lets you play through a little minigame that gives you the blue key, unlocking the backstage area right next to it. Here a brick wall is presented as the next obstacle, with the only other door leading to a couple of rooms, namely a second-story bathroom containing a jackhammer, which you can use to knock down the wall and finally get the key.
What makes this all work is how well communicated each solution is. If I just showed you a random puzzle with no clear way to solve it, what are you gonna do? Wander around the map for 30 minutes until you accidentally solve it?
Or you can skip all of that and snatch the lockpick from the security room. Both the lock and the boards on the door have 2 possible solutions each, mostly to prevent lockouts due to the neighbor placing traps or the game being a little buggy. I accidentally bugged out the toy gun at one point, so yeah, this is a lifesaver. The hammer and crowbar are on opposite sides of the first floor, so no matter which side you explore, you will find one of them. The hammer's in the garage, and the crowbar is under the bed for some reason. Finally opening the door gives a cutscene of the neighbor slamming it and burying you alive. This is a very well done expansion of the pre-alpha, and really only falters in the first bit where it doesn't demonstrate as effectively what the goal is. Although if you get caught a couple of times, a cutscene will play that insinuates that the basement is actually a portal to another world.
Less than a month later, the second alpha would be released to the public. And it was pretty alright. A dev commentary around the time said that this was some sort of tutorial to a much larger gargantuan house. Not only would this soon prove to be true, but also to be the reason that Hello Neighbor took a sudden turn for the worse.
Alpha 2 is a pretty good time, with some fairly basic logic puzzles and key finding. Not much to write home about. Though here is where the physics started becoming even more of a concern, because you could do really dumb crap like this, or this, with some consistency. I mean, are you seeing this? The neighbor's AI has degraded a bit, and a lot more testing is clearly needed. I mean, the guy can't even jump or even cross the street. Somebody please help this poor man. On that note, I'd like to quickly say that I still think the neighbor is way too goofy looking to be a horror icon. Like, look at him. It's just Buzz Lightyear. Alpha 2 is just okay, and it started to ease in the newer art style, which is much cartoonier and a lot less atmospheric and dark. A shame, because I thought the earlier alphas and prototypes really had something cool. On top of that, an extremely large basement sequence was cut from the alpha and never reused except in one trailer that showed off how it was supposed to play out. You can actually just use the dev console to check it out, and it is pretty interesting to see how much leftover stuff there is from a better version of Alpha 2.
It would be Alpha 3 where the first version of this gargantuan house would be revealed. And this one is a doozy.
First of all, It's now permanently nighttime. No reason, they just felt like it. Second of all, holy! The house is now absolutely massive. It looks like Pixar and Dr. Seuss teamed up to build the thing. The layout alone is a serious downgrade. The older alphas made it a mission to be sure that every room had 2 entrances the neighbor could reach and not get stuck in. In this alpha, if you jump across here, that's it. He can't get you now. He's supposed to be able to jump up onto this ledge area over here, but usually his AI tells him to beeline straight to you, and he just can't do anything. It's also incredibly open and not claustrophobic at all. For instance, this hallway is so easy to use as an escape route that it's almost a joke. You are faster than the neighbor by default. The game is supposed to make up for this by having the neighbor use his knowledge of the layout to cut you off. Instead, it ends up being that you only get caught if you accidentally bump into a wall, or if you fall off the 2nd floor into his arms. The alpha also has a really funny bug where when you pick up an item, there's just a random chance that the items next to it vanish from existence. Fun! This build leaned more into the platforming than anything else, and that was not a good idea. What with the extremely restricting jump arc and the awful object physics, it's a marvel it made it into Alpha 3. Overall, it's just a step in the wrong direction. I hope the feedback from the players will warn them and that they'll rectify this in the next Alpha. Oh, for the love of!
Alpha 4 did nothing except fill out more rooms in the house from Alpha 3. It also introduced being able to get abilities from fear rooms. In case you didn't think my room was scary enough.
The goal of this alpha is to once again open the basement, but now with an additional catch. You have to take the red key found in the player's car and take it all the way to this random suspended portion of the house and open this empty room. There is seemingly no reason to go in there, but doing so will teleport you to a bizarre minigame where you parkour your way to the top of a giant closet. Completing it gives you a double jump, which is required for the basement area. This is a fear room, and there were planned to be 5 of them. The Fear School, Fear Darkness, the closet, Fear Supermarket, Fear Factory, and Fear Hospital. Only 3 ended up in the full game, that being Darkness, School, and Supermarket. The other 2 never made it past the concept stages of development. The Fear Factory actually had a leftover playable version in one of the betas, but since I wasn't around to pre-order Hello Neighbor and get beta access, I'm just going to use footage from YouTube. Credit in description for that. It was supposed to give you the super throw, but it was scrapped and the super throw became something the player had by default. Both Alpha 3 and 4 marked the end of having 2 solutions for every puzzle, because now there is only 1 crowbar, 1 keycard, and 1 way to get the double jump. Almost the entire house is completely inaccessible to the neighbor, with only the ground and sometimes the 2nd floor being dangerous at all, and you can just completely outrun the neighbor and ignore his existence anyway, so why even bother?
After Alpha 4, the game entered the beta stages of development, and again, only people who had pre-ordered Hello Neighbor could play these betas. At least the 3rd one had modding support, but now, after all that, we have reached the full release of Hello Neighbor. God help us.
Hello Neighbor starts out as a short cutscene of a child kicking a ball. Thrilling stuff. Don't even try to explore this bit because the only thing you'll find are oversized simming posters and a Unreal Engine missing script. Really, guys? Now I want to touch it just to see what happens. Whoa! So now the child hears their neighbor doing something suspicious, so they run over to see them lock up someone in the basement. Oh no, he spotted us. Another cutscene clearly shows us where the red key is, and that we, the player, should obtain it and enter the basement. They even mark the window that leads into that room as important with this red border, which is pretty good design, I'll give them that. This house is essentially an even less complicated version of the Alpha 2 house, which has the same benefit of being claustrophobic enough for the neighbor to theoretically be a threat. And the AI is, oh no. Why can you lead the neighbor over here and practically do the puzzles uninterrupted? Why can you just lock him out of the 2nd floor permanently by choosing not to open the stairs? Why does he get stuck in his car? Why does he completely ignore you half the time? Why is the only way to progress to stack some boxes and jump around the house? Oh, and by the way, this is the best part of the game. It's only downhill from here. To get into the basement, you need to grab the red key from the 2nd floor bedroom. You can do this by pulling some shenaniganery with the magnet to get the lockpick, to get the wrench, to get this ladder open, or You try to time this bowling ball falling onto this lever to make the elevator go up. I have yet to do this successfully. You can also skip all of that and jump on this tiny ledge to avoid the entire first half of Act 1. Thanks. Once in the basement, you have to open this door by activating that generator, but you can only get in there when the power is off, so unblock these doors and run back before the neighbor comes down there and turns the power back on. Or alternatively, just abuse some physics objects and jump over the fence. Alright then. There is now a scripted chase sequence which ends in an unavoidable capture. On to Act 2!
Ah yes, my favorite thing. Fences.
Now you have to escape the neighbor's property. There are supposed to be 3 possible ways to get out of here. The gate, which requires the red key, the loose boards, which requires the crowbar, or the trampoline, which is supposed to require you to complete a bizarre water puzzle, but really just requires some boxes and a tad bit of luck. This allows you to beat Act 2 within a couple minutes of beginning, and it never fails to make me laugh. I think what happened was that they tested this gap with the adult player model's hitbox instead of the kids, because by abusing another glitch, you can actually get the adult player model into Act 2, and he can't fit through the gap. Now, I don't know why they would test with the wrong hitbox, but I didn't develop it. Maybe they're thinking 5,000 steps ahead. You could also use the extremely buggy physics to launch yourself into the stratosphere, but I didn't have any footage of this because I didn't think to try it at the time. All 3 of the intended solutions require you to flip these 3 levers and find the wrench in the fridge. Wait, the wrench is in the fridge? Why? Anyway, the levers are 1, behind the fence, who would look here, 2, up in this corner of the house, barely on screen when you are running through here, and 3, up here. This is the most fair to be honest, but it does require the wrench to reach, and that isn't fair at all. Flipping the levers gives you this red wheel, which can be used to activate important faucets like this one. The one right here in particular empties the pool that was blocking your progress, like in Alpha 1. This will give you the shovel, which allows you to dig up the dirt patch in the backyard. You could not do this in Act 1 despite both the dirt and the shovel being there because... this gives you the key to the dollhouse, which, by opening the doors inside of it, unlocks doors in the actual house. Okay, I guess. The water control room here allows you to freeze over a room you can fill with water to grab the red key. Or alternatively, you can go back down to the first floor bathroom, grab this miniature construction worker, run back up to the dollhouse, put him on the toilet in the dollhouse, then run back to the first floor bathroom to get the crowbar. What? Alternatively, you can try to solve the water puzzle. That doesn't even work properly. And jump on the trampoline. This water puzzle is just atrocious. Like, okay, hear me out here. You have to find every one of these isolated valves, make sure the boiler and water control are set to hot, and then pull the lever on this weird freaking machine. Which is supposed to lower the fence here, but I must have done something wrong because every time I try, despite confirming that I had every valve turned, it just doesn't do anything. Cool. I guess the neighbor is a little less of a pushover because of the more interconnected nature of the house and the fact that you can't just run across the street to delete his only chance at getting you. But you can just run around the house and outpace him so much that you can just run through the middle of his house and grab whatever you needed. Getting caught too much in any act will give you a playable cutscene of sorts. It gives you more details about the story, supposedly. But check this out. If you jump just right on this one, you can get on top of this fence and then jump off of the map. And... okay then. If you didn't notice, I am playing the full game on console. That's because I already own it on console and actually played it back when I was a good bit stupider and way more easily spooked. I legitimately couldn't bring myself to complete the basement section of Act 1 and even bought a guide to figure out the game's stupider puzzles. How pathetic can you be? I am not rebuying this game just to have it on PC, no thank you. Unfortunately, that means that I get horrible controls and it's even more buggy than the PC version. Cool.
And now here's a cutscene with one of the weirdest camera angles I have ever seen. So here, have a weird camera angle of your own.
A cutscene plays with the player running off and the neighbor getting distracted from the chase by something breaking in his house. Assumedly, whoever we were trying to save just saved us. But who cares, because right after that we wake up from a nap and now the player is an adult who's getting evicted from their apartment. Why does this sound exactly like my uncle? He thinks for a second and decides his best course of action is to move back across the street from his childhood kidnapper. Okay. I guess it was because he still owned the house or something. Maybe I should ask the lore people about the housing market in Ravenbrooks. Oh yeah, the name of the town is Ravenbrooks, though you wouldn't know that because of the game's bizarre design decision to have everything purposefully misspelled. I still don't understand this, but it does lead to some funny phrases. Kilm. It does a body good. Before heading into his own home, the player sees that the neighbor's house has been burned to the ground. There's barely anything left of it. Somehow it's enough to trigger a freaking PTSD attack, and the player starts seeing some weird shadow thingamabob. Then the player finally goes into the house, and more weird stuff and shadow stalkers compel the player to sleep it off, because with those visible bags under his eyes, he clearly hasn't gotten enough sleep in a while. Unfortunately, while he was sleeping, the neighbor built an entire monster house. The same one from Alpha 4. So now we have to find a bunch of key items and break into the basement. Again. Didn't we already see what was down there? Why are we doing this again? Why aren't we getting the police involved? Oh well, time to explore the illogical, physically impossible demon house that resides in Act 3.
Playing Act 3 makes me feel like when I got separated from my parents at a county fair. I was completely lost, I had no clue what random area I needed to go to progress, and there was some random guy making my life really annoying. Oh wait, that was my brother.
Where are you supposed to go? I mean, clearly you need a keycard and crowbar to get into the basement, but where are they? This is one of the major issues with the game as a whole. Lack of direction. Sure, it's usually obvious what you need, but there's zero indication of where you need to go to find it. I guess it's time to do the Hello Neighbor classic of running around with no direction until you accidentally solve one of the puzzles. And this time, they are absolutely absurd. Like, let's take the red key. First of all, you wouldn't even be able to find where it is until you hit this random painting that is right next to a bunch of extremely similar random paintings to open a secret door that kind of bugs out the furniture. Then you find this room with the red key wired to a small lever you can't reach. By mucking about in the room with the lever, you'll notice that hitting these shelf items causes them to glow for a short time. So surely making them all glow at the same time will be important. Unfortunately, there are 5 of them, and you can't pick up and throw objects fast enough to get all of them at the same time. So clearly something else is needed. Wanna guess what you are supposed to do? Alright, so you have to go around the entire house collecting 4 mannequins, all of which are in hard to reach spots like this one that requires you to grab this gramophone from behind the moon door, which can only be opened at night, and use it to shrink the plants. Okay, sure, you betcha. Oh, and remember this gearbox, it's important later. You also need to find 3 cake slices, which are so easy to miss, or so annoying to get, that it feels like a sick joke. This one requires you to open the sun door, which can only be opened at daytime. But whoops, now the moon door is closed, so you'd have to go back to nighttime and open it again and place an object in it so that the moon door won't close. Sometimes it bugs out and closes anyway. Then go back to daytime and open the sun door to get a slice of cake. There's also a flooded room, but that isn't important yet. Take all of the mannequins and slices of cake to the party room and position them like so to get the toy gun. None of this is communicated to the player whatsoever. I only know this from that silly guide I bought back in the day. You then take this gun back to the red key room, but whoops, you can't take it through this door or the room closes off. Also, don't throw it into there, or you will soft lock yourself. What you are supposed to do is go all the way back up to that gearbox I mentioned earlier, drop the toy gun in there, run all the way back down, and pull the lever on this unrelated machine, which empties out the gearbox, giving you the toy gun. What? Then you can use the gun to open the box with the lever. But if you'll notice, I had already activated that lever. And this is because you can skip the entire thing by throwing a physics objects into the box and switching the lever that way. The official guide tells you to do this. It told me the toy gun was an Easter egg.
Every single puzzle in Act 3 follows a similar convoluted structure, and none of it is explained. I think the only hint that exists in the entire act is this picture on a sack of soil depicting a gramophone affecting one of the bushes. And it's not even in an area where you need to use that mechanic.
Another wonderful example of this borked puzzle structure is how you need to get the key card. First of all, it's in the fridge for some reason, and it's frozen solid. So the solution must be to turn off the power so that it can thaw, right? Wishful thinking! Because there's actually a generator connected to the fridge that's just gated off on a random side of the house. So you need to go to this children's bedroom area and replicate this picture on the nearby shelves to open up the generator fence. But wait, hold on a second, because the guitar is missing. So what you need to do is go back through the moon and sun doors we mentioned earlier. I sure hope you didn't let them close, and enter the flooded room. But oh yeah, it's flooded, so you need to go to a completely unrelated section of the house to turn this red valve to empty it. Okay then. So you finally get the freaking guitar, but oops, you put the things on the shelves backward because the painting is flipped horizontally. So now you have to deal with the game's awful placing controls for even longer. And as a reward, you open up the fence, turn off the generator, and watch the card thaw slowly for 2 minutes straight. Or you can skip all of that and heat up a bucket and use it to melt the ice. You see why I hate this game? The only, I repeat, only time the game has ever communicated what the goal is and how to get to that goal was in the first half of the first act. And we aren't even done with Act 3, because remember those fear rooms? Yep, they're still as dumb as ever. The game doesn't tell you they exist, or that they are marked by these orangish doors, or that they are required to complete the basement of Act 3. The only one I think that gets a pass is the supermarket, because it's right in the middle of the house and most players will end up going through its door by accident while going somewhere else since it doesn't have a lock on it.
The supermarket's minigame itself is honestly pretty clever. You have to push this shopping cart all the way to the end of the level, while avoiding these shopper mannequins by using the invisibility ability that they give you. However, you also need to get close enough to these shopper mannequins to see what they're putting in their cart, because you have to have the 5 items they shop for in your cart by the time you reach the end, otherwise it'll drop you through the floor and start you over. This one is perfectly fine, if a little bit too reliant on trial and error.
The ability obtained is invisibility. By crouching and standing still, you can become literally undetectable for an indefinite amount of time, which means waiting for that godforsaken keycard is a trifling matter. The fear of darkness still requires the red key and is still off in a weird separated section of the house, although now when you open the door there is literally just a closet. Nothing else seems visible until you absent-mindedly walk in and get teleported. Love that so much. Wouldn't it be funny if the player just didn't walk through the doorway because it looks like there was no reason to? We already covered the absurd stipulation of getting the red key, so we aren't going back into that one. The fear of darkness is almost exactly the same as it was in Alpha 4, with the exception of the creatures at the top throwing objects at you. See, back in Alpha 4, there was a random chance that one of the creatures hiding in the darkness above you would chuck a random object at you to deter your progress. Yeah, that's just gone here. It's mostly just annoying platforming, but it isn't too difficult.
It's the fear of school that makes me want to say things that aren't typically allowed in schools.
Okay, so the green key is in this little turbine room stuck to a giant magnet. Oh, don't accidentally take any metal items in here or else they are stuck until you finish the puzzle. What you need to do is go back to that gearbox we used earlier and throw some random junk into it. I'm not kidding, it could be something as little as an apple core and it'll stop the entire mechanism. This also stops the magnet for some reason, and no, this isn't hinted at all. Green key in hand, you go to this little room that's hiding behind a massive stack of boxes, and get zooted away to the worst part of the game. No joke, this is completely awful. The only chance you've really got is if you are extremely lucky and the teacher mannequin decides you aren't worth their time, or if you manage to squeak by onto these desks. Once here, you can just wait for this teacher mannequin to remove almost every student mannequin in the entire schoolroom. Once there are so few threats it's practically a joke, you can sprint your way to the end of the level. Just make sure you hop into the lockers while the teacher is prowling, because dear lord, that thing is fast enough to catch you in 4 seconds from a mile away. The beta versions of this minigame let you use the double jump if you had it unlocked, which made this far more about parkour and staying out of reach than a chance-based waiting game. Honestly, I think that would have made this one more bearable, because as is, it makes me want to break an actual window. So completing this one gives you the ability to shove away the neighbor when he catches you. To be honest, this just makes it even more trivial to avoid him and leads to some funny bugs.
Once you have all 3 abilities, the key card, and the crowbar, I forgot to talk about the crowbar.
It's just in a random electrical box and you need to cool it down with water. Or alternatively, just wait like 20 minutes for it to cool down by itself. But before we leave, let's quickly say, there is a golden apple in the game, and the guide says that only the most skilled players can find it. In reality, you get it by planting a random seed and waiting 3 real-life hours for a tree to grow. Oh, by the way, the golden apple does absolutely nothing now. It is quite literally just a Steam achievement, and I don't have this on Steam, so I'm not going to bother getting it. Just let me leave Act 3, man. It's already page 9 of the script, and I don't think my voice is gonna hold out much longer.
With all 3 of the abilities and the all-important door open, you venture forth into the borked basement once again. Only this time, it's a lot more straightforward.
The basement is quite literally just a check to make sure you have all of the abilities. The crouch invisibility is required here to sneak past this thing. Wait, it's canonically called the Thing? Okay, that's just kind of funny. The double jump is required to get over this fence, and the shove is required to fight off the neighbor at this door. but in reality, with some advanced bugging out, you can skip all of them except the shove, so that's also kind of funny.
The final act finally begins, and man...
First of all, the neighbor is giant now. No reason, just felt like it, and everything is in a white void. Thanks for breaking immersion completely, Neighborino. It's just a sequence of barely communicated annoying puzzles to get the neighbor to crouch down so that you can make it into the little house on his back. Yes, it's weird. Yes, it's dumb. And yes, it is incredibly annoying to do. Apparently they still haven't patched this bug with the toaster that allows you to get launched twice at the same time and get flung off at the wrong angle. Whoopee! Finally making it into the house gives you a little playable cutscene of sorts that tells you just about nothing. Great. Then it's on to the real final boss, Leshy from Inscription. I'm joking, it's just the thing again, and our goal is to protect our past self by body blocking the thing's attacks. Which makes us grow bigger, I guess. Anyway, if you miss it accidentally, you get one of the funniest screams ever and a loud thump. Try again, bucko! Finally finishing this weird boss gives you the final cutscene, which tells you that the entirety of Act 3 and 4 were just a dream.
Oh no. No. You're telling me that the worst parts of this game, the parts with the least clear reason to finish them, were just a dream. Man, screw this game, I'm leaving.
Yeah, that's it. That's Hello Neighbor, the horror icon and poster child for dynamic pixels and Tinybuild. A rushed, buggy mess of a stealth horror game. It was much closer to just a bad puzzle game with elements of stealth, and it feels like such a missed opportunity. The early prototypes and alphas were actually quite good. The puzzles that were there made a level of sense that just isn't there in the full game. The goal was always clear, there were always two solutions to any problem, and the AI was actually a threat. But the more they leaned into the parkour, puzzles, and absurdist art style, it fell apart at the seams. The selling point was supposed to be the neighbor and his advanced AI, but he ends up being a glorified obstacle that barely does anything beside make you watch a loading screen every time you get caught. In summary, just play Alpha 1. It's free, it's still on Steam, and it's leagues ahead of the final release.
But despite the game being a pathetic joke and a waste of potential, it sold like hotcakes, reaching over 30 million units worldwide. So despite our best wishes and the terrible review scores, Dynamic Pixels would begin jumping on every single bandwagon they could possibly find. The first of which being a prequel game to flesh out the story. Could you flesh out the gameplay first?
Hello Neighbor Hide and Seek. It sure is a game, alright. Look man, the entire game can be summed up like this. Collect a bunch of the same item in a massive, terribly designed map, and don't get caught by the AI, which is somehow even worse than the neighbor, because if you do, he'll steal some of your items and put them in random locations in the giant map. Are we going to tell you where those locations are? Do this 5 times and that's the game. Man, even people who liked Hello Neighbor think this absolutely sucks. And it was also very clearly rushed. I mean, making and releasing an entire game in the span of 1 year is, not a good sign. I'm not going into further detail because this is one of the times where I don't care. This is just not worth it. Don't buy this game. You can get the same experience by watching a dump of the cutscenes on YouTube. That's all you need from this thing. The rest is a mockery of game design.
The spin-offs don't end there, however, because somebody at the office must have read the FNAF books or something and thought, say, we should do this for Hello Neighbor.
That's right, folks. Hello Neighbor has an official book series, and oh, come on! Can we please skip this bit? Well, no. Because information in a large number of these books is vitally important to understanding what the actual heck is going on in this mess of a series. Wonderful! The first 3 provide details on the main character and his relationship with the kid that got locked up in the basement. The 3 after that give more details on that kid's side of the story and show what the forest protectors are, and the other ones are bad.
Then they jumped on the social deduction bandwagon and released Baby's first Dead by Daylight. You think I'm joking, don't you? Well, allow me to introduce to you Secret Neighbor.
Secret Neighbor is supposed to take place in between Act 1 and Act 2 of Hello Neighbor, apparently, because the goal of the game is to reach the basement and free your trapped friend. The caveat is that this is a multiplayer game, and one of you is secretly the neighbor. Okay, It's honestly not too bad after about 4 years of updates, but it is still completely insulting how many microtransactions there are. Like, dude, you made me pay $45 for this thing, and then expect me to pay for some Fortnite skins on top of that. No. The entire game is summed up by running around the house looking for keys and keycards as a kid, or running around the house pretending to be a kid and catching people off guard as the neighbor. It is aggressively mediocre, and the fact that you can get Dead by Daylight for cheaper makes this even more insulting.
They also made a card game based on this entry. Yep, this is real, and yes, it's terrible.
The last main spin-off of this era is Hello Engineer, a Stadia-exclusive scrap mechanic wannabe that is once again extremely okay. From what I hear, the only similarity to Hello Neighbor is that it takes place within the IP. Nothing else. Well, the Stadia exclusive part definitely helped its sales, but I guess it's coming to Steam now, so that's one less point against it. Around this time, Tinybuild would just hire Dynamic Pixels full-time, and Dynamic Pixels would be rebranded to Eerie Guest Studios.
But coming back to Secret Neighbor, there was actually a hidden event that triggered a sort of weird storm that nobody really understood the purpose of. That is, until they found the door. No, not that door.
This door! These kinds of doors typically have a numbered keycard to go with them, but this door appears to require a question mark keycard. So the hunt began and people scoured the map for this thing, eventually figuring out that they had to hit this bird so that it would drop the keycard. Okay. This gave access to a room that had a teleporter and a printer. By triggering the storm event, the teleporter would be powered on, and a few kids could go through, which presented a sequence of colored lights to be inputted into the printer. This would give 4 letters of some kind of code. At the same time, it was discovered that putting /HGP into the Secret Neighbor website would present the user with a massive red button that says, "Don't press that button." Naturally, they pressed it and were given a zip file that could not be unzipped without a passcode. See where I'm going? By using the printer a total of 5 times, the community figured out the 20-character password and unzipped the folder. They were presented with HGP, or as we know it, the Hello Guest prototype.
This prototype would be the first build available for the true sequel to Hello Neighbor. And to be honest, it was actually pretty good. I know, shocker!
This prototype throws the player in with zero explanation for where you are or what the goal is. Considering that the only finished models were the guest himself and a couple items, that's fair enough. The player is a man named Quentin, and he is tasked with keeping watch over the abandoned Golden Apple amusement park and driving off any vandals that should happen to wander inside. Not all is as it seems though, because a bizarre bird-like creature stalks about and a strange wall covered in explosive blocks off something seemingly important. The visuals of the alpha are a little rough around the edges, but overall are quite good at establishing the exaggerated creepiness of the place. Especially the design choice to slant this section so heavily. I think that's cool. Sure, there are some untextured buildings, freaky test models for the hooligans, and a slightly janky physics engine, but aside all of that, the core design is actually quite good. The puzzles are extremely simple and make logical sense. You need to put gas into this tank, play a short minigame to stop the steam from blowing out, and insert a fuse into this box that clearly shows you need a second fuse.
But you aren't able to solve all these puzzles immediately. No, first you've got to pull a working class and pay taxes.
The game is running on a time limit. If you take too long, your shift will simply end and you are taken to the store. Additionally, if you are caught too much and Quentin gets too stressed, you will black out and the shift will immediately end. This stress mechanic essentially gives a sort of health bar to the player. Getting caught increases it significantly, and certain things like the hooligans playing an air horn out of nowhere will increase it slightly. Certain items will reduce this stress meter, like the tea or pills, but they often just aren't worth using. The aforementioned hooligans will wander into the park and start vandalizing the place, breaking down the little shacks and even starting fires. Now one might think, well, why should I care? I'm only solving puzzles. The counterpoint to this is that the items you need to solve those puzzles are exclusively found in the store you are taken to after each shift. Whenever the shift ends, you will be paid a certain amount minus how much damage the hooligans caused, which makes perfect sense, because that's what you're supposed to be doing, that's your job. This is why the hooligans are important. If you don't keep them at bay, you won't get enough money to get the materials you need to solve the puzzles. Oh, but Peter!
What?
Can't I just grind out a ton of low payout days and cheat the system? No, because this game actually has a bad ending. If you go through too many shifts without successfully finishing the game, you will see the wall, and presumably whatever was behind it, get blown up by the guest. He literally triggers a bunch of C4, it explodes. Then it's time to restart and actually keep the hooligans at bay this time. But let's scale back and look at the guest, the main antagonist of the game. A gangly bird-like creature that is bent on stopping you from finding out what is behind that wall. He is so far the only character in Hello Neighbor to successfully scare me, at least at this stage of my life. He stalks the player fairly sporadically, but only when they are looking away. If the player turns to face him, he realizes he left the oven on and skedaddles. He will round the nearest corner and wait until the player is again looking away. He will occasionally peek around the corner to look for the player and probably freak them out in the process. He is especially effective in tight spaces where the nearest corner is a few feet away and you have to keep a constant eye on his last location to ensure you don't get backstabbed. The sounds this creature make are an assortment of strange clicking noises, further unnerving the player in the already bizarre and lonely setting they are trapped in.
Speaking of which, this place has got more atmosphere than my room. I should probably open a window.
It is a thing of beauty when Eerie Guest goes for a more creepy Tim Burton-esque style for their games. It was effective in the early alphas and prototypes, and it is definitely helping them out here. Before you even know that something is out to get you, there is already a level of uncertainty and suspense due to the towering park equipment and angular exaggerations of broken down vendor stalls. The closer you are to the exceedingly large Ferris wheel, the louder the sounds of creaking metal become, and that, paired with the droning ambience, the clicking of the guest, the sudden crashes from the hooligans destroying the property, and the beating of Quentin's own heart, builds up an atmosphere that is almost guaranteed to put the player on edge. The ending to the game reveals that behind the walls an extremely important location known as the Mayak Weather Station.
This station is apparently responsible for the catastrophic storm that floods most of Raven Brooks at some point in the series. But again, I don't care about the lore. They lost me at Act 3 was all a dream.
The prototype got the fans hyped for what could possibly come next. That and the leftover excitement from the mystery solved just to find the game was palpable in the community. And as is Hello Neighbor tradition, they wouldn't have to wait long.
Mere weeks later, the pre-alpha for Hello Guest would release on Steam, along with a pretty cool trailer, which showcased parts of the game that ended up being scrapped.
Hello Guest is by all intents and purposes a refined version of the prototype. There are more puzzles, everything actually has a model, almost everything is textured, and there are proper cutscenes this time. In Hello Guest, you play as either Quentin or Beatrix, both of which are once again tasked with protecting the Golden Apple amusement park from vandals and figuring out what exactly is going on around here. The opening establishes that not everything is hunky-dory and that Quentin isn't exactly the most competent guy for the job. You are given a small map that tells you to go to the security office. Doing so essentially forces you to see most of the area and its key locations. If the player threw away the map by accident, that's okay, because the phone in the office is ringing and should naturally draw the player towards it. Quentin picks up the phone and the goal is made clear. Check the top of the mountain. This goal is made even more obvious in the following cutscene that shows some strange things happening on top of that mountain. The puzzles are once again logical and satisfying to figure out. The key to the main building you need to solve puzzles in is located in the attic of the security office, which makes sense because of course the security people should have access to the buildings they are trying to secure. Then it's all about using generators to solve simple puzzles and utilizing the all-new camera mechanic to open up the doors in the elevator shaft. Then you must use a fire extinguisher, which works like a jetpack for some reason, to ascend the elevator shaft and get to the final cutscene where Quentin is kidnapped by the man in the hat. Or you can use this combination machine, and instead of opening the second door, you can just abuse the springy shoes you can make to boost all the way to the very top of the shaft, which has an unlocked door. Throughout all of this, the guest and the hooligans, now with their own model and sound effects, continue to be a nuisance, and thanks to the smaller play area, it is much easier to drive the hooligans away, but also easier to get caught off guard by the guest. This build unfortunately does not have a bad ending if it takes you too long to figure things out, which I thought was a little sad because that gave a very real punishment for getting caught too much. On the other hand, this alpha fleshed out the design and atmosphere to no longer reuse assets from the first Hello Neighbor, and that definitely makes it feel more unique than something like Hello Neighbor Hide and Seek.
This game really looked like it was going to go somewhere, and behind the scenes, it really was. They had plans for the full game. Heck, they even showed footage of Act 2 in the trailer for the alpha. But something happened with the game's main designer, and whoever took over after him decided to rework what they already had into something a little more reminiscent of the first game. So, the world was mildly shocked to see a trailer drop for Hello Neighbor 2.
Right away, this trailer demonstrates the vision for this version of Hello Neighbor. The guest has locked the neighbor in the attic, and the player must outwit the guest to save him. Some incredibly cool mechanics were shown in this trailer, such as the ability to set off distractions like the teapot and set up your own cameras to keep track of the guest. However, the guest quickly realizes that someone has broken into his house when he sees the camera. He rips it off the wall and darts up the stairs. The player runs and hides, showcasing an interesting trip mechanic that looked like it would be one of those trailer-only kind of things, but no. Hitting the guest in the legs will actually cause him to trip and ragdoll like that. The player continues to run and drops his items due to a fall, only to be caught and dragged by the leg to his presumed end. This is still my favorite trailer in the entire series. It demonstrates so effectively what makes this such a cool concept. But on to the alpha itself. Does it live up to the trailer? Yes. Yes, it does. Hello Neighbor 2 Alpha 1 actually has every mechanic shown in the trailer. Except for the guest using the buzzsaw, but that latch isn't in the alpha anyway, so The puzzles are, once again, completely logical. The key is in the fireplace, so you need a fire extinguisher. The crowbar is in this room, but the door is locked behind a code. However, you can watch the guest put the code in to figure it out. If this was Hello Neighbor 1, the code would be hidden in a random room of the house or some bullcrap. The guest himself doesn't work as he has previously. He instead acts like a more refined version of the neighbor from the first game. He will routinely feed the fire and do mundane things until he hears a noise he didn't make. Then he will check out the noise and look for the player. If he finds the player, he will chase them down and utilize his knowledge of the house to cut you off and catch you. Additionally, the guest will get increasingly fast if he's running in a straight line, so juke him out and throw objects at his legs to get away. If all else fails and he manages to get you, he will grab you by the leg, drag you out of the house, throw you half a mile, and make you drop all of your items on the way out. This bit where you are being dragged is actually a grace period to let the player have a chance at escape. By throwing objects at him, you can knock him over and free yourself, giving you a small window to get away. The guest will place traps that fire trash bags at the player to make them drop items and alert the guest to their location. These are a little janky, but they're okay in my book. The guest's house is really well designed and has lots of places to hide and plenty of ways to distract Mr. Birdman. There are rarely any dead ends and plenty of ways for the guest to cut you off or catch up to you. The only really open room is the downstairs main area, and that isn't even very big in the first place. There are technically other parts of the map you can explore, but they don't serve much purpose. You can find some goodies like additional items to distract the guest, but that's about it. The guest doesn't let you roam around alone, though, because he will sort of switch on the old guest AI and stalk you when you aren't looking. If he manages to catch you while you are not on his property, he will steal one of your items and then make a break for it. The only required items outside of the guest's own home are right next to it. Perched atop this burnt-down building is a rope, which you must use in the nearby junkyard to swing into the little house containing the fire extinguisher.
I'll admit, this part is a little frustrating, but it isn't nearly as bad as the Fear School or the entire puzzle structure of Act 3.
Falling too far will make you drop your items, so be careful about that. You'd think with the amount of item dropping and stealing that it would be extremely frustrating to find your lost items. But no. The first failsafe is that if a dropped item isn't picked up quickly enough, a small murder of crows will circle the item and communicate where the player should go to find it. The second failsafe is that the guest will take any item he finds on the ground or steals from the player and put it into the lockers, fridge, and even the microwave in his house. If you lose an item and can't find any crows, chances are the guest has it stashed somewhere in the house. Anyway, once you finally get everything you need to open up the attic, you open it up and find a Birdman costume. Soon you will find the neighbor is waiting for you outside, and the alpha ends right then and there.
Hello Neighbor 2 Alpha 1 was really good. And once again, we wouldn't have to wait long for Alpha 2... Oh, I'm sorry. Alpha 1.5.
Yeah, instead of releasing a second alpha, they made an updated Halloween version of the first alpha. To be honest, this is my favorite game in the entire series because it takes the best parts of the first alpha and makes them better. It does remove the traps, shame, but it adds so much that it hardly feels like a problem. The opening cutscene shows the guest kidnapping 3 children and stashing them in the attic where the neighbor is also presumed to be by the missing poster Quentin has with him. The house's layout has changed in a few ways, mostly on the second floor, and the surrounding neighborhood has become much more important. The puzzles are a little more complicated this time, but still completely logical. The crowbar is no longer in the code room, but instead behind a fence overlooking a conveyor belt. Plugging in a generator, which you can easily find whirring away on top of the gas station, into the conveyor belt shows that you will need to get that crowbar onto that conveyor. If you use the fire extinguisher at all, you will notice that it flings around physics objects, so that is the intended solution. Although not unlike the red key in Hello Neighbor, you can completely bypass this by throwing an object through the fence. Whoops. Getting the fire extinguisher requires you to reverse the other conveyor belt so that you can get through this gap, and it is a huge improvement over the awful rope swing required in Alpha 1. This alpha includes a hidden faster way to extinguish the fire, and that is these bottles you can find. If you take them to this little spot where the crowbar comes out, along with some bottles to demonstrate this mechanic, you can fill them with water, and throwing them into the fire depletes it by half instantly.
Assumedly, this is to compensate for having to switch the conveyor backwards and then also put out the fire. And I think it's really cool.
Once you make it into the attic, the game doesn't end. Rather, you see that there is a trick-or-treat bag sitting empty on the floor, and behind this red door sits one of the kidnapped children. The other two are scarecrows for some reason. So now it's time to do some trick-or-treating yourself. 5 of the houses in the surrounding neighborhood have pieces of candy, and each requires you to use items you found in the guest's house to overcome a small challenge, whether that be plugging in a generator by swinging on the cable, using the ledge grab mechanic in the fire extinguisher to parkour, or the crowbar to access the house in the first place. Should you wander into one of the non-mandatory buildings, there is almost always an extra goodie for you, be that a camera, some gas for the generator, or even a camera drone which you can use to see what no one else can. If you accidentally let the guest steal one of the candies, never fear, he will stash them in the candy bowl upstairs. The guest can actually pick up and throw objects at you now, with considerable force at that. Falling from a great height no longer makes you drop all of your items, thank God, but the guest seems more prone to stalking you outside of his home, probably because going out and about is more prominent, and that he doesn't actually have to fuel a fire anymore due to this conveyor belt. The man in the hat from Hello Guest still makes a cameo, and he actually marks the secret spot where you can find the blue key to get the propeller hat, which lets you go. Overall, it is a more polished and content-rich version of the first alpha, and I really liked it back in the day. I even played it on this channel when I was streaming pretty often. Oh yeah, I haven't mentioned the music of these alphas yet, but man, they popped off with these tracks, making the most genuinely unnerving and interesting tracks in the series. Anyway, by placing the candy into the bag in the attic, the child behind the door gets closer and closer until...
And that's where they left us for a year. They just stopped talking about the game completely. Apparently, some inner turmoil once again caused the main developer or designer to change, and that much is very obvious when the next trailer for Hello Neighbor 2 would finally drop.
This trailer, if you couldn't tell by the name, focuses primarily on the new AI system planned for Hello Neighbor 2, a neural network they call it. Essentially, it learns from each play session, and not just by placing traps, but supposedly figuring out what escape route a player is more likely to take, or if they're going to hide in a specific closet. Even when first revealed, concerns were raised. What happens when they get too smart? Are they going to start abusing exploits or making the game downright impossible? What is some poor sap supposed to do 20 years from now when Mr. Peterson has the brains to catch him every single time?
Most of these questions went completely unanswered. And we were also shown a lot of footage of a house that looked very interesting to navigate. It's a shame we didn't get any of it.
I think the only thing that stays from this specific trailer are some character models and general art style choices. Even the neighborhood lost a ton of personality it had in this trailer. Just look at this exaggerated road, or the hooligans and police messing with the cat, or the man in the hat actually being in the game. Another trailer, 2 months later, would essentially just remind the public of what the first trailer said, and that they should wishlist the game on Steam. Another couple months later, and the E3 trailer would drop, which gave us even more footage of a neighborhood we would never see, and gameplay we would never get. Another month and a weird devlog thing would give us even more information on this build of the game. Apparently, we would not only be doing the main quest with Mr. Peterson, we would be doing side quests at other places as well. Essentially, this would be an open-world Hello Neighbor game.
The next trailer showcased the beta build, which had a lot of things, most of which we wouldn't get.
The beta for the game had a lot of things that were promised, namely the guest actually showed up as part of the tutorial and as the fake-out ending. Presumably he would be used in the actual ending since he was so important. The game was actually open world, you could explore any location in any order. The only thing that was notably absent was the neural network. Indeed, the AI seemed to have reverted to the days of Alpha 2 where they can't jump and don't know what to do when you leave their designated area. I can't really say much more about the beta because I didn't trust the Hello Neighbor developers to follow through on their promises, so I decided not to pre-order the game. And man, that was a good choice because at launch, Hello Neighbor 2 was just... At release, Hello Neighbor 2 was meh. It had its fair share of bugs, I'll tell you that. I mean, just look at this clip from Fiznom's stream.
No, we need to find a way to get this.
This was nearly 3 months after release, by the way. Sure, there were some issues, but the game at its core was okay. The puzzles were mostly logical this time, although maybe the placement of these two ways could be made slightly less hard to miss. This one is just a little ridiculous. Is much better than the first game. But that doesn't make it really that good. Let's put it this way. While the first game burns in the depths of hell, the second game manages to claw all the way up to the bottom of the barrel and decides that that's good enough. The game starts with a cutscene depicting Quentin as he witnesses the neighbor kidnap his own child.
Yes. Discipline.
The neighbor comes back out with a shovel and a nasty gleam in his eye. Quentin fumbles with his keys and eventually gets them into the right place, although not before the neighbor smacks his window. Oh yeah, at launch he stuck the key into absolutely nothing. Quentin swerves into a barn to avoid running over the guest, and that is the only screen time the guest got in the entire main game.
Yeah, the flagship character for the sequel, since its inception, has been kicked to the curb.
Anyway, the barn is a pretty effective tutorial that teaches most of the game's mechanics. The neighbor gives Quentin a concussion and the hunt for our stolen evidence begins. The first area is Mr. Peterson's own home, which is now being investigated by a resident policeman. This policeman's partner, who showed up in a lot of trailers, appears for about 4 seconds on the camera here. After this, he is never seen again.
Are you seeing a pattern?
One thing I neglected to mention was that starting in Alpha 1, Quentin can heave himself up small distances to compensate for jumping not being the best thing in the world. Overall, this and the not completely terrible jumping controls give what little parkour there is in the game a much better feel. This climbing mechanic isn't all sunshine and rainbows though, because it contributed to some of the easiest wall clips and sequence breaks in the game. Honestly, if you master using it in tandem with the fire extinguisher, you can pull off some positively loony tricks.
Okay, Mr. Tangent, we're moving on. No! I need to talk to you about today's sponsor, Lone Star Piece!
The Peterson residence is a very simple demonstration of the game's puzzle design. Everything has a hint, everything is logical, and everything works the first time. It doesn't just randomly fail for no reason. Bedroom puzzle! You need 3 dolls to place on this dollhouse, and that is communicated by 1, all 3 of the dolls being within direct line of sight to the dollhouse, and 2, this drawing here of the intended solution. This well-done design continues here, where the solution is communicated by 1, the first block you need to solve the puzzle being right next to the puzzle, and 2, these flags that show you what order to enter the numbers in. I'll only show one more puzzle, I promise. To get to the second floor, you need to utilize a pair of scissors to cut this police tape. And since you don't have those yet, you will naturally solve the other puzzles downstairs. Right next to the third doll required for the dollhouse puzzle is a small map showing that something important is in the neighbor's treehouse. And that is, in fact, the pair of scissors. Without this hint, the player would have no clue where to go and would eventually either give up or start exploring the surrounding areas and finally find it, only to scream, "Why is it here?" The AI isn't completely brain dead anymore and actually has a functioning pair of eyes this time. However, they can't jump. Usually this isn't a problem, but it gets really easy to juke Mr. Peterson later in the game, so whoops.
Completing the Peterson residence will give you a couple of tips that lead you to the museum. Every section of the game will end in solving some puzzles here. But before you can do any of that, Quentin picks up a shovel and has a PTSD attack. What is with these main characters in PTSD? Like, come on, it's all of them so far!
Now the objective is to obtain the museum's main key from the bakery, and again the logical puzzles are here and are pretty fun to solve. I won't spoil any more puzzles if I can, but the goal is to get the 4 missing register buttons and enter in this number, located right next to the register and in bold ink, to get the key. The baker's AI is... The museum section actually requires you to solve some puzzles this time, not just pick up a shovel. And you have to avoid Mr. Peterson along the way. He is pretty bad at actually catching you and basically can't do anything if you make it to high ground. They patched some of the lower elevations from being completely safe, and they clearly tried to make jumping on this crow not an option, but it isn't enough. You can still make a complete fool out of the neighbor. The next section actually does the whole Hello Neighbor thing quite well. You have to go over to the taxidermist's house and find the code to a safe in his front yard. Note that the goal for each area is made obvious by the camera shots you are given before each one starts. His house is extremely claustrophobic, and he can in fact place traps and can catch you very effectively. Sometimes you can juke him out, but usually he'll pop you with his gun to slow you down and run towards you as efficiently as possible. He doesn't give up the instant you leave his house, either. He will follow you up to the outer boundaries of his property and will not let up aggression if you try and come back in. The only real problems with this area are this item placement, seriously, what? And that the vault code never changes, so repeat playthroughs and speedruns can ignore the entire area.
So, we've already committed breaking and entering 3 times and interfered with a police investigation. So what's next? A felony?
The next place we break into is the mayor's house.
Ah!
It's more logical puzzles and simple reasoning to obtain another key to a part of the museum. It is also hinted at multiple times that some kind of raven cult exists, but yep, it's never mentioned or used at all, just another thing that they'll add in future updates. The following museum section results in us getting locked away upstairs, and now the goal is to escape the museum. Some very simple puzzle solving, high-speed neighbor gaming, and opening of the front door results in this cutscene.
The end. Oh, what, do you think I'm joking? Yeah, despite all the praise I give it for being a half-decent game, Hello Neighbor 2 is a complete, utter disgrace. And it's not because it's worse than the first game in any way. No, it's significantly better. It's because they lied. And they lied a lot.
Remember that whole neural network that was advertised throughout the 2 years leading to release? Yeah, it isn't here. For the 3rd time in this game's development, something behind the scenes led to major parts of the game being scrapped. Not only did the entire neural network thing get scrapped, but the additional characters like the man in the hat, the farmer, and the guest were simply not used. On top of that, the open world thing also isn't here. The beta build, which was a few months before release, did the open world and for some reason just disappeared in between then and release? Why? How? If you even try to do the locations out of order, you can't. It completely unloads entire buildings in the game until you're supposed to be able to access them. Oh, and the ending is a cliffhanger, because they hadn't actually finished the game. Saying that you have plans for future updates essentially says We didn't finish the game, but we had to release anyway. Please don't hurt us. Hello Neighbor 2 is like a well-baked cake that somebody spilled a hot sauce on. The cake itself is perfectly fine, but everything on top of it is a complete disaster. The core is there. The gameplay is there. But they just didn't follow up on what they promised us. Now you might be thinking, hey Peter, it's been over a year since release. What have they added?
Not much, all things considered.
They re-added the mechanics of paint cans and garbage bags. These were in the trailers and were simply missing at launch. They've added some collectibles and additional puzzles regarding them. They've added the fountain puzzle, which brings back the absurd puzzle structure of the old games. Okay, hear me out. There are these gnomes everywhere that act as cameras, right? And there are 4 specific gnomes around the fountain that for some reason can be rotated with little pressure plates. These are night vision gnomes. At the right time of day or night, these gnomes will have staticky black and white vision, and allow you to see some hidden symbols if pointed the right way. One of them is obscured completely by the cat, and you need to go over to these garbage bags and grab a treat for her. And even once you do this thing, yeah, this isn't working right. Press the stones on the fountain that correspond to the symbols, and voila, a teaser for an area they haven't added yet. They added some secret passages and rearranged the entire second floor of the Peterson residence, fixed untold amounts of bugs, crashes, and AI issues, reworked and improved nearly every animation in the game, made hiding under tables not an instant win button, and added the Forest of Raven Brooks.
In patch 9, the most recent one up to now, they added an entire new area to the game, with a couple key buildings, and a new, old, returning villain. The Guest. Yeah, they remembered he exists!
The Guest is finally back, and he is not the same. He isn't the intelligent, neighbor-like fellow he was in Alpha 1, or the stalking creeper he was in the pre-alpha. No, he's simply a menace. The forest is an incredibly open area, and usually this spells bad news for the neighbor's AI because they're slower than the player by default and have trouble catching up if there aren't tight corners to cut the player off with. The Guest looks at all of that, laughs, and runs toward the player at the speed of sound. He is twice as fast as the player, and the only thing you can do to defend yourself is boarding up doors and blocking him with those same boards on the minecart. Other than that, there is literally no escape. Even high ground doesn't matter this time because the Guest can leap to high places and strangle you regardless of altitude. The puzzles in the first area of the forest, the sawmill, are essentially a very long, convoluted way to put some boards into the minecart. Trust me, you will need those boards, because when you finally use the minecart to ride off to the next location, the Guest decides he isn't finished with you yet and dashes after you. Then you have to spam boards on the sides of the minecart to avoid getting yoinked out of it. Once you finally make it to the last stop, it's a mad dash to the church building, and once you close the door, that's it.
Yeah, the Guest doesn't really go into the church for some reason. Maybe he's an atheist.
The church mostly consists of pushing the game's platforming and board placing mechanics to the absolute limit. There's no real puzzle solving here, just figuring out how many boards it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Roll Pop. After an enormously long session of trial and error, you ring the bell, it falls down and destroys part of the floor, allowing you to do a couple puzzles under the graveyard, and get the final cutscene, which only raises more questions. That's the game! The forest is such a misused location, too. There is a massive amount of the map that goes totally unused and unseen because the player is too busy trying not to get yoinked by the Guest. This is the perfect environment for his old mechanics from Hello Guest to come back, and I will never understand why they didn't use them. To be completely honest with you, I think if they keep adding more areas and expanding the game, they just might get a little further up the barrel, or even be considered a good game one day. But as is, the additional content isn't that great. Speaking of additional content, this game had Day 1 DLC. Yeah, pretty scummy, I know. But on top of that, these things were so buggy that they were nearly unplayable and in some cases, literally impossible to finish. The Back to School DLC is the more interesting and more stable of the two, while the Late Fees DLC is super messed up and focuses mostly on platforming, so yeah, these aren't really worth it. Both of them are just kinda whatever, but at the price they are going for, they are not even remotely worth it. I'd sooner buy an unusual hat in Team Fortress 2 than buy one of these pieces of crap. Oh yeah, Hello Copter exists. I mean, come on, it's not worth 10 cents, much less $6. Please buy a better game, I'm begging you. Apparently everyone else is catching on to Tinybuild's tricks because they aren't doing so hot and other companies are looking to buy, including
It's always them!
And that's the Hello Neighbor series. Yeah, sure, there was the VR game and the mobile exclusive game that came out fairly recently. But do you really expect me to trust Tinybuild after all of this?
I want this series to succeed. I really do. They've had some great ideas, some wonderful prototypes, and I know somewhere in there there's a bunch of talented people giving us some games. But they always trip themselves up right at the finish line, and I just wish they'd do better. I mean, if somebody picked up where the alphas left off, I'd buy that game.
Which is why I decided that it's my turn. Yeah, that's right, I'm making the game myself. I've had some practice with game development over the years, and I have most of the basics down, but this is going to be a learning experience. It'll probably take me absolutely forever to do this. So why am I telling you guys this?
So that y'all can remind me not to give up on it or forget about it.
That's what I want to leave you guys on. A bit of hope. Hope that one day Hello Neighbor might pick themselves back up and do something cool, and that even if they don't, my game will be chugging along in the background.
You! I'm sorry!
Hey, real talk here. This video took the better part of 2 months to make, so I'd appreciate it if you subscribe. I'll eventually be posting short devlogs on my progress with the game. Probably gonna shoot for one every month, but you know, scheduling is hard, so we'll see. That along with college is gonna stretch time a little thin, so there's gonna be a few less like normal Speedy Boy videos now. And I know that's sad, but I guarantee you, when I finally get the gang together and we finally record that thing, I will finish and release the Mario Party 9 video, which I wanted to finish and release last December, but don't expect that anytime soon. Scheduling is hard already, and it's even harder when you have to deal with 3 other people. Anyway, that's all I really wanted to say. I don't think there's anything else, so...
Them in the attic where the neighbor is also presumed to be by the missing poster Quenting has with him. Quenting. Quenting? His name is Quentin! Okay. Quenting?